Hey, guys, and welcome to another episode of WFM Tipsy Thursdays. I am your show host, the Contact Center Whisperer, the CEO and founder of Solid Rock Consulting. And I am super excited about this particular topic and this guest that we have with us this week. This week, we're talking about what are some of the metrics that you're measuring to measure the effectiveness of workforce management. And so this week we have the amazing Colin Crowley, all the way over from Maven Clinic. Colin, thank you so much for being our guest on this week's show. I'm super excited to dive into this topic with you. But before we do, again, thank you so much, and tell us a little bit about yourself and when you first discovered workforce management and started to engage with it.
Yeah, so thanks, Juanita. It's great to be here. And I've been in customer experience for 15 plus years now. I've bebopped around all sorts of different industries. So I run customer support teams in fintech, in food tech, in event ticketing, as random as that sounds, in healthcare, and also peeked under the hood and led customer support in SaaS as well. So it's kind of been all over the place. Really interested in workforce management because it really speaks to the center concern of all customer support leaders, which is how do you balance efficiency and quality in your organization? And if you can get that balance just right and reach a world where you can increase both at the same time, that's what makes you a successful customer support leader. And how you use people and how their time is used is a terribly important component, probably the key component in allowing you to make that balance manageable. So for me, getting that just right has been a key goal throughout my career.
And so I'm super excited to dive into this topic with you, especially with you being the VP of customer support over at Maven Clinic. What are some of those things that you have found, if you had to express in your own words, like, okay, these are some of the things over customer success that I'm looking to measure the effectiveness of what we're doing around our workforce management, having those right people in the right place. Like you mentioned, quality. What are some of those things that you're looking for as a leader?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is you want to make sure your metrics are holistic, because it's very easy sometimes in customer support to over-index on efficiency-based metrics, because those are typically easy to calculate. Like any customer support platform allows you to calculate how many calls, how long the calls were, average handle time on emails, and that sort of thing. But it's harder to understand things like employee satisfaction or customer satisfaction or quality of contacts and so forth. So I think the first thing is you need to make sure that you kind of bucket your workforce management metrics in key areas. So one should be more of a qualitative focus in terms of contacts, and one should be efficiency based. And one I would kind of generally put under the idea of utilization. So having an understanding of how your agents are spending their time. So under quality, you may have things like employee satisfaction scores for agents, alongside customer satisfaction scores, which can be a leading indicator of a stressed workforce, especially if customer support's causing some of those problems. So those are some of the key metrics, and having like a good internal quality assurance program to monitor the quality of contacts. So that's under quality. And then under efficiency, that's where you may have more standard metrics like average handle time across the board, or also schedule adherence among your agents, and things of that nature. And then under utilization, I think utilization is really important these days, because more and more contact centers are branching out customer support agents where they're not just doing contacts all the time, but with AI technology taking away some of the lower level contacts, that's freeing up the space for customer support agents to do more with their time. So they may be spending now 70-60% of their time in contacts, and another percentage of their time doing other things, either managing AI systems that you have and QAing those, or participating in training, or participating in knowledge management, or maybe they're doing more in social media, maybe they're doing more to help with content development, with marketing, or maybe they're doing more to help the operations team. So how you kind of understand how people are spending their time and how you structure that in your actually schedule mechanism, that's a big challenge. And that's all kind of falls under some sort of utilization metric, which you typically have to develop internally. But it's key to make sure that as the workforce is diversifying in their responsibilities, that you are using people at their maximum efficiency and giving them maximum opportunities to showcase their skills.
I love that. Like, I love the whole thing, right? But my favorite part of what you said was kind of at the middle, at the beginning and at the end, when you talked about measuring, not only, you actually led with this, measuring the employee satisfaction. So many times organizations are talking about measuring customer satisfaction, But if we're not looking at, and people know I die on this hill, right? Without an employee experience strategy, your CX strategy is trash, because who is serving the customer? It's the employee. And so I think that there, especially as a customer service leader, we have to look at the employee satisfaction. And how are we engaging our employees, equipping our employees, empowering our employees, so that as a byproduct, the customer experience is naturally going to be impacted, and going to be impacted positively. So I love that metric that you honed in on there. And then I also loved, as a true workforce management person, right? Like the utilization piece, talking about how are we using our employees, because in resources, right? Just resources, period. Because nowadays we're not just talking about human capital, we're talking about AI, we're talking about various types of resources that are serving our customer base, and understanding how they are being most effectively and efficiently utilized is going to be so important as we start to think about scale and growth. As we know, though, they're not the same thing. But as we think about how we're growing organizations and how we're scaling, leveraging maybe AI or different things, understanding that utilization factor is so chef's kiss. That was amazing, Colin. All right. So knowing some of those metrics that you're looking for as a customer support leader, can you tell me what are some of the common myths that you see when working with those metrics, or maybe even building them from the ground up as setting the metrics in an organization? Like, hey, we should be looking at this. What are some of those common myths or mistakes that you see organizations or leaders make?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'd say a few things. One I kind of mentioned already, which is making sure that you may be tracking a whole bunch of things, but you have to make sure that you're weighting them pretty much equally. So in my experience, those three things I mentioned should pretty much be weighted equally, because sometimes it's easy, again, to over-index on efficiency-based metrics just because there are more of them and they're easier to get. And that can create a bit of a logical fallacy that that's where the good stuff is, and that's what we're going to focus on. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're weighting the metrics and messaging to your team that all these things are important. So quality is a third, efficiency is a third, like utilization is like a third, or whatever the case may be, but making sure you're being very careful with weighting. So that's kind of one major thing. The second thing I would say is don't be afraid to customize metrics. So don't be afraid just to take the metrics that come out of the box for your customer support platform, because maybe those don't exactly work for your particular situation. So as an example, at another company I was at, we were very conscious about rating agents on an SLA-based metric for call time, which is to say, we expect you to get roll calls in 5 minutes, and if you don't, then we track the percentage of time you're adhering to that standard, because that binary can create perverse incentives for people to rush customers off the phone, and also focuses the agent on 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And instead, we had what we called a violation percentage, which was like an SLA in reverse, where we said, we want you to be more generous with the time you're talking to customers, but we will track the percentage of calls that go past what we consider to be in a very abnormally long period of time. So the goal was to not have your violation percentage be as high. And psychologically, that kind of emphasized to agents, I can spend a little bit more time with certain customers. And I just know in those few conversations that may go over, then that will be reflected. But those are very few and far in between. And it allowed us to track outliers, but not in a way that created a perverse incentive for agents to short shrift the customer. So I would say there are many different things in organizations where you may sit back and say, maybe we should customize a metric or a metric approach, taking inspiration from what's already there. And kind of using that method as well, rather than just kind of leaping into what's immediately available. And the last thing I would say is just be transparent with what you're tracking, too. I think is really, really important, because there's this feeling in customer support work that someone's peering over your shoulder, and that can be an uncomfortable feeling. And if you don't know all the metrics that are going into the evaluation of you directly, and even the team as well, then that can be very disconcerting and make people feel out of place. So being very transparent with what you're tracking and why you're tracking it, and even consider the idea of having metrics that are flexible based on team averages. So there's kind of an inbuilt way you can take into consideration ebbs and flows and contact volume that may not have anything to do with the work of the agents, but may impact their ability to hit certain metrics. So thinking of like a very transparent, flexible metric system can be a great tactic too.
Yeah, I love those three, right? Understanding what the weight, like weighting them equally or weighting them based on your organization, right? Setting those weights based on what those metrics and how they impact your organization. I love, love, love. I absolutely love the customization piece because one size does not fit all, and customizing it based on the behaviors that you're wanting to drive inside of the organization. That's so key that you tapped in on there. I hope if you're listening, right? I hope if you're listening, you really got what Colin said there, because that is so amazing. Because so many times we say, oh, well, industry best practices or industry standard. And it's like, well, it's almost like the same. My mother and used to hear this growing up, like, don't come tell me what Sally doing in her house. What I do in my house, how I raise my kids is how I'm raising my kids. Oh, it's almost that same
Yep.
concept, like, so it's great that there's an industry standard and a best practice, but what does that have to do with how I need to serve my customers and what my customers expect from me, and therefore how I need to create processes and train and equip my employees, right? So that's very interesting, and I think that it's often overlooked and undervalued. So customizing what those metrics need to be based on the behaviors that you're wanting to drive. And then last but definitely not least, I love that you mentioned transparency, because many times we as organizations set these goals, arbitrary metrics, and then they kind of change behind the scenes, like, oh, this is how we're calculating AHT, or this is how we're doing X, Y, and Z. And the agents are like, well, yeah, you might want to let us know about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can't, you can't measure what you're not, or you can't manage what you're not measuring. And so you definitely can't manage what you don't have transparency and visibility around. I think that that just creates a better culture. So I absolutely love that. Okay, my last question, which you kind of already answered, you're a pro at this. Okay, so what are some of the tips or tricks then that you have seen when organizations are trying to implement or stand up a new metric as it relates to driving customer satisfaction or employee experience around those metrics? What would you, to a new leader or someone who's not maybe new, that are like, man, I need to try something new? What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. I would say definitely the first thing again is anytime you're launching something new, transparency around why. So why that's being launched, and also being mindful of giving like a trial period, because people may be worried like, oh, how is this new metric going to impact me? But give them a trial period to understand, okay, how do my metrics look in this new paradigm first, so people feel again that you're giving due weight and consideration to their direct experiences. So I'd say that's a really important thing. The second thing, as I would say, actively be proactive, looking at ways to track the qualitative metrics, because again, those are harder to come by and they're less natural to come by, and you have to put more effort into getting them. So you have to put effort into surveying your employees, or effort into creating a QA program. So you want to think about, okay, what are other areas we can use to track quality? Because it's very easy for that to fall by the sidelines over time. And also make sure that when you get quality metrics, you find some way to tie them back into corporate level goals. So find some way to tie them back into revenue, and that will give those metrics more status, so to speak, versus the efficiency metrics, where it's easy to find the ROI behind those, but harder to find what's the ROI behind employee satisfaction. So kind of being mindful that as you're building up these qualitative metrics, you're also connecting them with what's going on in the rest of the organization. The last thing I would say is, don't look at it just about creating metrics, but also as you create new metrics, what things can you do as an organization to celebrate people across the board who are hitting those metrics, and providing examples for how other people may be able to hit them who may be struggling. So rather than just focusing on how we're implementing metrics, it's what's the ecosystem of support around the implementation of those metrics. And do you take agents that are really high performers who do a really great job balancing quality and efficiency, and do you kind of celebrate them and use them as a case study, or take their learnings and incorporate them in your training program as an example? So how can you be really proactive, creating an ecosystem of support around your metrics as opposed to just launching and tracking.
Man, that was so good. Okay. That was so good because I absolutely love the part. I was just doing a webinar not too long ago, last month actually. And one of the things that we're talking about, actually, we have another one that's coming up here soon. But I was just recently talking about how it's so important to tie those qualitative things and those quantitative things, both actually, into the business goals. It's so it's so easy for us as organizations and as leaders rather to talk about getting buy-in, right? But what we should really be talking about is getting tie-in. How do I tie in my initiative to the overall organization's goal and mission, ethos, like what they are wanting to drive as an organization? If I can do that as a leader, then I don't have to get buy-in because I'm tied into the organization's goals and mission. You mentioned revenue, like, hey, if this is a big goal for us to drive revenue this year, or if this is a big, which is always a goal, right? Right. But if this is a big goal for us to really improve employee experience this year, whatever your initiative is, that metric, that quantitative and qualitative metric needs to tie in to the overall organization's goal and mission of where they're going and those big goals. That way you'll get the tie-in and the support that you need. So I absolutely love that. I can go on for forever for that, but I won't bore the people. I promise you, not today. If you had to leave us with one piece of advice, something that we have not covered in this particular topic that you want to leave us with, what would that be?
I would say that there's a lot of interesting technology going on with workforce management that's going to be up and coming in the AI space. And I think it's kind of worthwhile to keep your eye on that. And if you have people in your customer support organization who are technology innovators or keeping their eye on technology, you should take a look at that because especially when it comes to these tricky areas like utilization, like we were speaking with, there's a lot that AI can do to help with some of those seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Yeah, that's been amazing. You've been amazing, Colin. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today.
Sounds great.
Awesome. How epic was that? Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to have Colin back for sure. Like, I'll rank him back in for you guys. Okay, that he was so amazing. He dropped so many tips, and I've already recapped them during the show. Normally I recap after the show, but he was so amazing that all of the things were just spot on. Listen, if you have a topic that you want to cover or you have feedback of something else that you want to talk about, you want to dive into this a little bit more, you already know what to do. Send me an inbox message, DM me, find me wherever you're watching this episode, right? And let me know. Until next time, go be great and let's make impact. See you guys soon. Bye.